Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 2 fall cards that feature kind of a mix and match of products. The products that I'm using today are brand new from Altenew. They are available now over at their site, and I thought I would give you a peek at some of the products from the Altenew release. This is not all of them, but I'm going to be taking several of these and mixing and matching them to create a couple of fall cards. Now, one thing I did want to mention is that I'm actually doing this voiceover in my car, so if the sounds a little different than normal, that's probably why. It's a busy day and I've got things going on, so I'm just fitting it in when I can. Now, this Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die is fabulous. These are kind of a line of die from Altenew that create a bunch of different shapes at once. Also, we have the new Leafy Splendor stencil and embossing folder. Those were also from a previous event with Altenew, so you may have those in your stash already. This is the Pumpkin Patch Bundle, and I absolutely love this because it includes a stamp set, some dies for the sentiments, stencils, and an embossing folder, so you can use these in a variety of ways to create a bunch of different looks. Also, I have the Pretty Pumpkins layering die set. I will be using this on one of my cards today. And as I mentioned before, we're just going to mix and match some of these products to create a couple of fall cards. Now look at these storage pockets from Altenew. They're nice and large. You can fit more than a half sheet of cardstock in them. They're very nice and big, so you can keep all of your products and your cardstocks in there for a project. They're nice, heavyweight, and I thought you may want to check those out while you're on their site. And finally, we have the Perfect Picker tool. Now, this is a tool that has one wax end and one kind of needle tip in. It's not a super sharp needle tip. You can see I'm poking it into my finger. It is definitely not a true ball tip, but it's not super sharp. I love the white with the gold and the rhinestone accents. And of course, this wax tip is really great for picking up embellishments and placing those on your card. Now, a couple of the products that I'm not using today, but I thought were really cool, are some brand new press plates from Altenew. You can see I have the geometric series. This is the circles here, so those are some designs that you can use with your Better Press or your Glimmer hot foil system, and also the version in the squares. I also really love these One Go sentiments. Now, this is again a press plate, so you can use this with your Glimmer hot foil system, or you can use it with your Better Press to create a letterpress look. Now, the really cool thing about this is the die is actually a teensy bit smaller than the actual sentiments. So you're going to get that bleed. The color and the foil is going to go all the way to the edge on these, and I think that was ingenious. Now, for my stamping today, I'm going to be using the Stamp Wheel 2.0. This is larger than the original Stamp Wheel. They've made some improvements to it, and this will be available in November. It's not quite available yet, but you can pick yours up for pre-order right now. So if you are interested in getting your hands on this tool, I would recommend putting in your pre-order now. Now, the cool thing about this Stamp Wheel 2.0 is not only is it larger than the original, but it also has one side that you can remove. It kind of sticks in place with a magnet. So you can put a full sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock and allow it to kind of hang out the side. So if you want to do a lot of stamping on a large piece of cardstock, or if you want to use some of the larger stamp sets from Altenew, this is perfect for that. So I have my Pretty Pumpkin stamp here, and I'm going to be heat embossing this onto this white cardstock. So I have my stamp mounted on my flip plate, and I've prepared my cardstock with some anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp using some Altenew embossing ink. So I'm going to make sure that I cover this really well. This is a large stamp, so I'm going to be kind of stamping this more than once to make sure that I have good coverage. And once I feel like I have that inked really well, I'll bring the flip plate over and press the stamp onto my white cardstock. And I'm just moving my fingers across the entire surface of the stamp to make sure I'm transferring that ink. But I will also re-ink this stamp and stamp again. Now, the beauty of any type of stamp positioner is that you can stamp a second time if you don't get it exactly right the first time. Now, because clear embossing ink is a little more difficult to see, I went ahead ahead for good measure and inked again and stamped again in the exact same place so that I could have a nice solid stamped image. Now, once I rub all over the surface of this, and this time I'm bringing in just a dry microfiber cloth to allow my hand to kind of slide across the surface of the flip plate, I'll go ahead and remove my cardstock from the sticky mat that is inside of the stamp wheel, and then I'm going to sprinkle on some gold embossing powder. I'm going to make sure that the entire image is coated nicely and that I kind of dust off and flick off any extra powder that might be sticking to areas that I don't want it to stick to. And because I prepped this surface with some powder tool, I didn't have a lot of stray embossing powder. Now I'm just taking my heat tool and heat setting that embossing powder until it is all melted. Now you can tell it's melted because it will be a smooth surface, it will be shiny, and it doesn't look grainy at all. Once you get to that point, then you want to move on with your heat tool and do not continue heating in the same area, because you can over melt embossing powder and kind of take away from the dimensional nature of it. Now you can see my cardstock is actually pretty warped, so I'm going to place this back into my Stamp Wheel 2.0 onto that sticky mat that's inside of there, which is made of photopolymer. And you can see that it flattens out nicely, and that's going to allow me to do all of my stenciling over this image and hold the paper and the stencils in place as I work through this. Now, Altenew includes these stencil guides with their stencil sets. They're really helpful. It's going to kind of guide you where each of the areas that you're stenciling will be. And I'm going to keep that off to the side as I work through this, but I'm going to tell you that I am using multiple colors on each stencil, and that's because I wanted to create a really beautiful fall palette. I wanted to kind of do my own thing, so I am going to do that here. And so I have all of the colors listed in the YouTube description below, but I am not going to try to talk you through the colors that I'm using. But I did leave all of this in here so that you can see where I'm putting each of the colors of ink. And for this palette, I really wanted a fall palette, something that felt like fall, but that wasn't getting into those deep, dark jewel tones that we often think of when we work into the fall palettes. I wanted there to be some warmth, but I also, because we're still kind of on the edge of summer, I wanted there to be some light, bright areas, and I knew I wanted some pink as well. So I'm using various colors of Altenew inks. I'm using some of these brand new fall harvest colors, which are so beautiful in the fresh dye inks. I'm also bringing in some dusty pinks and some terracottas. I have some Jade Dreams for the greens, which are kind of a softer gray green, but we'll get into various tones of those so that we can bring in different intensity as well. Now, for all of the blending on these stencils, I am using the mini blending brushes from Altenew. They are one of my favorite blending brushes. I just feel like I have a lot of control, and this allows me to put the color exactly where I want it and not have to mask off different areas. Now, these stencils also include etched outlines for some of the images, so those are there to help you kind of line up your stencil with your stamped image. And I apparently am going to answer a text message right here and then we'll get back into ink blending. So if the pumpkin that I blended before has those creamy kind of warm yellows, then I'm just going in with the same colors. I'm not using two really different families of colors on each of these pumpkins, but I am using different families of colors on each stencil. Hopefully that makes sense. So for instance, in this pink pumpkin that's directly in the center, I started with dusty pink, and I'm doing a either lighter hand with the dusty pink for the second stencil or a heavier hand for the dusty pink with the second stencil. And you'll see me work through all of these colors and all of these stencils, kind of just making it up as I go along. I don't have a plan in place. I just knew I wanted a mix of these gray greens, these warm yellows, dusty pinks, and kind of the pinky oranges like in the terracotta and the rouge. Now the Sicilian amber, this is a beautiful color. It makes great pumpkin stems, so I'm using that on the stems. And you will see me go through from time to time and wipe off my stencil before I'm moving on to the next color. That just keeps me from contaminating my blending with any ink that might be sitting on top of the stencil. Now, because the piece of cardstock that I'm working on is so large, and the stencil actually doesn't touch the sticky mat that's inside of the stamp wheel, I am using some satin masking tape to hold those stencils in place as I do my ink blending. But I love this new stamp wheel size because it does allow me to place my ink pads kind of in that upper corner, and that sticky mat that's inside the stamp wheel kind of holds my ink in place as I dip my blending brush in there and work through all of these different colors. Now, while you continue to watch me ink blend, I just wanted to mention that this video is a part of a video hop that's happening today on YouTube celebrating Altenew's brand new October release. There are some wonderful fall products, which you previously saw at the beginning of this video. And I didn't show you all the products that are available in this release. I just showed you some of the ones that I picked from. But I wanted you to take the opportunity to go to the YouTube description below once this video is over and check out the entire video hop, because there's going to be lots of inspiration, lots of creators along the hop, and there are prizes that you can enter to win as well. I don't want you to miss out on this opportunity. Also, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects today in the YouTube description below. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can use those links to shop. Those are affiliate links. I really appreciate you using my links, so thank you in advance. But as I mentioned, if you're looking for anything, including the ink colors that I'm using, the blending brushes, the stamps, the dies, that's all listed below. Now, while I create these fall cards, it's kind of ironic because here where I live in California, it is 10:34 in the morning. It's currently 88 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're looking at a high of 104. So while my heart is longing for fall, it does not quite feel like fall yet. And that's part of the reason that I think I chose this lighter, brighter fall palette. It still feels very fall, but it definitely doesn't have those deep reds and deep greens that we would normally see in a fall palette. So I really do hope you enjoy the palette that I chose for these cards. I will also be mixing in some golds as well as some moss and sand dune cardstock. Those are a part of the new Crafting Necessities cardstock line from Altenew. I've really been enjoying using the cardstocks, and they match so well with the Altenew inks that are already in place. Now, I ended up ink blending the entire image, and I'm not going to use the entire image. So if you wanted to start by die cutting your piece ahead of time and only blending the areas that you're going to use, you could definitely do that. I just wanted to see kind of what this would look like once it's all blended. So I went ahead and just did the entire image. And once I do trim this down, I will have a couple of extra pieces that I can use as borders or as smaller elements on other card projects. Now, once I'm done with my blending and I've removed all my stencils, I'm going to wipe over the embossing powder to make sure I don't have any additional ink sitting on the surface. And then I will get ready and move on to the other elements of my card. So I'm starting out by prepping a piece of white cardstock, and I am going to stamp one of the sentiments from the pumpkin patch stamp set right onto this white cardstock. I'm using, again, some clear embossing ink and covering that with some gold embossing powder. I thought this warm hug sentiment would be perfect on top of this for kind of this season of fall and gratitude that we're coming into. So I'm going to use the coordinating die and run that through my die cut machine to die cut that out. Now, here is a look at all of the cardstocks from Altenew that I have. I've gone ahead and swatched them out, and this swatch ring is perfect for bringing into a project and kind of figuring out what color cardstock do I want to use with this palette that I've chosen. I'm going to be using some Pastel Sunrise as well as some Sand Dunes cardstock, which I think coordinates with this palette beautifully. On the second card project, I will also be using some Moss cardstock, and I will be bringing in some of the Altenew brushed gold cardstock. So I am using an A2 layering die to die cut the background. You can see I have a couple areas that I can use on another card. And once I've die cut that, I will also use the Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die from Altenew and run that through my die cut machine, die cutting it from some of this brushed gold cardstock from Altenew. I love this. This is going to give me some elements to kind of mix and match with this background that I've created. So there's several leaves that are die cut from this background. You can see that you can use not only the leaves that kind of pop out of the background, but this whole thing, once you use the negative space, could be used as a cool shaker card window. And that really is the whole idea behind these zero waste dies, is that there's no waste. You can use the negative portion as well as all of the elements that are die cut from the background. So play with this and see what you like, but I think that these leaves are just absolutely perfect size. I popped a couple out of the background and I'm just kind of nestling them behind my heat embossed greeting. I'm also going to take one of the small sentiments from the pumpkin patch set. I'm stamping it in dusty pink onto some pastel sunrise cardstock, and I'm trimming that down into a little strip with my trimmer. And eventually that's going to kind of nestle in with that warm hugs sentiment to create my entire sentiment. And I believe I stamped I miss you, but I can't really see it right now. So I'm just gluing that onto this little collection of pieces that I've kind of started adhering together. A lot of times when I'm creating, if I have smaller elements and I know where they're going to go, I go ahead and kind of glue them together so that I'm not, dealing with a bunch of small pieces on my desk. Now here's where I decided to kind of create a layered effect with this background. I took a smaller A2 size layering die and nestled it into that outer edge. Then I took one die up from that, just one size larger, and die cut it from the brushed gold cardstock. And I am going to mat the centerpiece onto that brushed gold cardstock. I'll then pop this up in the center of that frame that we've created, adding a little bit of dimension to this background and a little bit of interest as well, and bringing in a little bit more of that gold. So you could use that centerpiece on its own, but I'm deciding to use the entire thing. Now for my card base on my first card, I am using the Sand Dunes cardstock. It is cut to 5.5 by 8.5 inches. I'm scoring it at 4 1/4. This will create my A2 card base for this background that I've created. And I'm going to just start adhering things. So the outer frame that we've created with all that ink blending, I'm adhering directly to the card base. So there's no dimension at all on this. Then that center portion with my greeting and the frame around it, I'm going to pop that up inside of this frame to really, as I mentioned, add a little bit of dimension. So you can see I have my foam adhesive on the back and I'm just going to line that up, and it makes a really cool effect because the pattern continues from the center where there's dimension to the outer frame where there's no dimension. And I think that's just a really cool look. And then I'll add my sentiment grouping here to this lower right hand corner using a little bit of foam adhesive, and that finishes off card number 1. Now I wanted to continue to use some of these products and create a different card. So you can see I actually created an ink blended background. I didn't end up loving that. I know it looks kind of cool right here, but I didn't love it. I was going to use it with this Pretty Pumpkins layering set. I thought I would leave this in here so that you could see it. Instead, I went with a more simple background. So I'm cutting the layers from the Pretty Pumpkin die from Pastel Sunrise cardstock, and then I'm adding this to my ultra sticky 9x12 grip mat or grid mat from Altenew, and I'm holding these die cut pieces in place because I'm going to add a little bit of ink blending to them. I grabbed the Dusty Rose ink that I've been using throughout these projects, and I'm blending just some lighter and darker areas on these layering pieces of the pumpkin. And for the stem, I did die cut that from the Pastel Sunrise cardstock, but I'm going to just blend right over that using the Sicilian Amber ink. And then I'm using the guide inside of the Pretty Pumpkins layering die set to help me align all of these layering pieces. And now for applications like this, I really like to use a liquid glue because I can kind of slide things into place if I don't land them in the right place to begin with. So I'm just using my Barely Art liquid glue. I'm using a pair of tweezers to help me place things. And what you cannot see is my layering die guide over on the side where I have that, and I'm following along to assemble this in the correct order. Although I think it's not like a super precise thing with this particular layering die. I think you could get things off and it still would look just fine. Now that little pick tool was also helpful in adding some of the smaller elements to my pumpkin, and you can see I've started kind of adhering some of the gold leaves from that Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die around my pumpkin. I have those adhered. I've also created a heat embossed sentiment just like I did for the first card, but I decided this needed a little more color. So I grabbed that Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die and die cut it from some moss cardstock from Altenew, and I'm tucking in just a few of those elements around and kind of weaving them through with the gold leaves to kind of create a variance of color. I love the gold, but I just felt like it needed something to break it up a little bit, and I tucked those in, and I have some foam adhesive on the back, so I will adhere that to the background using some foam adhesive. Now for the background or the card front for this card, I'm using the Pumpkin Patch embossing folder. I'm running that through my Platinum 6 die cut machine to create an embossed background. This is a little more simple than that ink blended background, and I felt like it allowed this kind of focal point to shine a little bit more than that more watercolory ink blended background. So I'm just trimming this down and adhering my pumpkin little vignette here, and then I will add that entire thing onto an A2 white card base to finish off my card. And isn't this absolutely beautiful? A perfect way to express gratitude and show your love this holiday season. I love the tucking in of all of those leaves around some of these elements and sentiments, and I loved how we mixed and matched several products from this brand new Altenew release to create a couple of fall cards that are kind of easing us into those fall color palettes. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube, so if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. You can also head on over to my blog. I'll have that linked in the YouTube description below. Over there, you're going to find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As I mentioned before, this video is a part of a video hop celebrating this brand new release from Altenew. I think you're going to love this release, and I think you're going to love the inspiration along the hop. So be sure you check the YouTube description for more information. I want to say thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed these projects. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials I share. Thanks again for watching. I'm so glad you're here, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to my channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.